as I said, these are two huge topics. And so in 40 minutes, basically only planning to share some ideas and resources and opportunities for action. But I want to ask you to either we're going to have breakout groups. So I want you to either get your phone ready to take a picture of the screen that has the discussion questions for your breakout groups, or have a pencil and paper ready for when so that you can write it down. So before I start, I want to review our group norms, and this is what we're using for all our meetings every month and any other activities that we're doing with the Voter Participation Initiative. It's based on some of what we learned about what is nonpartisan activities from Reverend Douglas's Worthington's discussion on way back when. And if you haven't heard that, I strongly encourage you to go to the EDS Civic Life site and hear that recording. But anyway, the group norms are in terms of listening respectfully. All discussions will be nonpartisan, and nonpartisan discussions are okay with us. And of course, differences of opinion are frankly important. So there's recently was an article about how many California voters get their information from social media, even though they don't trust it. The good news in this article is that most Californians actually do read the voter guide materials that are sent for them, but they want more. And so they turn to social media, particularly young people. And we know that that's a challenge. So why do we care about misinformation and disinformation and fake news? And let me just take a brief moment and do some definitions. So misinformation is sharing wrong information, but actually not realizing whether it's true or false, but just sharing it. Disinformation is when you know it's false information and you're intentionally sharing it as true information. So that's the difference between the two of them. So why do we care? This is from the Episcopal Church Office of Government Relations. As Christians, we are not called to a life of half-truths and deceptions. We are called to follow a God who is the way, the truth, and the life. The prayer book also teaches that among our duties to our neighbors is to be honest, fair in our dealings, and to speak truth and not mislead others by our silence. Let us therefore examine our own conduct to limit the spread of deceitful information and call upon our leaders to work towards the same. This is from the Episcopal Church site, and it includes a wonderful booklet in terms of misinformation and disinformation that includes the definition similar to what I just told you. So this PowerPoint, I'm assuming Chris will be, well, it's going to be on the recording, and we might be able to hopefully make it available to people as well. But I definitely encourage you to look at that, because it is many more materials than I'm going to be able to share tonight. But what I do want to share with you is this wonderful flyer that is on that website. And I want to strongly encourage you to print it out and share it with your congregations, because it's just a one-pager that people can pick up. But it's something to say, before you retweet something, ask yourself some questions in terms of where it's from, what is missing, are there other news organizations saying similar things, and how does it make you feel? And as I said, this is something that I think is really something we could be sharing with our congregations, and it's not political. Other things to consider, and these are similar: learn who to trust, who your trustworthy sources are. be mindful of differences between fact-checking news, personal information articles, talk shows, satire. Daily Show is a lot of source of that for everybody. Propaganda and gossip. And then consider feeding back a comment or a private message about a post that you might suspect is misleading. To communicate to elected officials that protection from disinformation is important to you, and seek understanding of the relationship between free speech and disinformation. So you also can take action, and there's a national nonpartisan election protection coalition, and they a very large coalition, including the Episcopal Church, and they have a wide range of tools and activities aimed at protecting, advancing, and defending the right to vote. And it includes, which I found very interesting when I heard a presentation about what they do, is a misinformation and disinformation working groups. So they have volunteers monitoring social media, and they are tracking it and kind of reporting it, and also working on removing content that violates the platform's terms of services. So if you want to take action, this is an opportunity to be involved. Now, as I told you, I'm whizzing along. so we're now moving on to civil conversations topic. And on the web, there are many sites trying to discuss civil conversations with techniques, with questions, with approaches. One of the ones we want to talk about tonight is living room conversations. And I've asked Jill Henderson, who is from St. Bart's in Poway, to present on that and to share her experiences with it. So Jill?
Thank you. And I'll talk really fast. So, in 2021, St. Bart's, our Peace and Justice Ministry, began a collaboration with a neighboring parish, Incarnation Lutheran, which is also in Poway. And we both had an interest at that time in civil discourse, especially considering the growing polarization of attitudes in the country and even in our own parishes. So we envisioned a community conversation on Zoom and explored the Living Room Conversations website and its toolkit for conducting those kinds of gatherings. And we chose the first conversation guide that we would tackle would be Listening Courageously. And it was a virtual event. And then we went on to offer other sessions every few months, and we've done so up until the present, including topics like American Creed, which actually is a video in Sacred Ground, if any of you have taken Sacred Ground, Communicating with Care, Housing and Race. That's one we actually customized ourselves, but used the LRC format. And then earlier this year we did one on faith in the LGBTQ plus community. Now, last week, we co-hosted a community conversation on faith and politics. And this will be one of 5 monthly conversations that we have planned on topics related to the upcoming election. We had a group last week of 14 people. Most of the conversation took place in 2 breakout rooms. And my group shared very thoughtfully on several discussion questions that are already pre-programmed into this toolkit, by the way, including separation of church and state. We discussed that. For me, the highlight was a very engaged exchange around the importance of trust and duty when viewing voting and elections from a perspective that includes our faith. And it was great. And we talked a little bit about how we have to work to establish trust in our relationships first, so that difficult conversations may be less challenging in the future. So that was a great conversation. Then the next slide, I think, goes into the format. Yes. So this is the format. It's real simple. It's why I love it. I call it plug and play. It's simple. It's structured to practice communicating across differences while building understanding and relationships. It offers a wide range of topics. When we first started, there were about 100. There are now 160. Just in the last couple of years, they've added more. One was added this week on bias. And then it starts with an introduction, why we're here. People introduce themselves briefly. Conversation agreements, which we'll look at in a minute, much like we do here, and how we will engage. And then there are 3 question rounds. Again, the questions are already built in, although you can customize them if you like. The first round is getting to know each other. Second is exploring that topic with very specific questions about that topic. And then round 3 is reflecting on the conversations that were had. And then we close with feedback. And we do start with an opening prayer and a closing prayer. And I think that will cover that portion.
Go cover the agreements.
Oh, I'm sorry, the agreements. Sorry, I digressed. Where are my agreements? So be curious, listen to understand. Curious is a big word in this toolkit. Show respect and suspend judgment. Note any common ground as well as any differences. Be authentic and welcome that from others. Be purposeful and to the point. Own and help guide the conversation. And I will add to this, when we send out and when we do the promo on these, we explain in very simple words that this is not a debate. It is not to debate issues, but it is nonpartisan, and it is to go into dialogue and find common ground.
Thanks, Jill.
You bet.
So I want to do an exercise. We're not going to be able to do, we're not going to take the time to do the introductions part. So we're going to do round 2 and 3 in terms of actually answering the questions. And so I'm going to share the topic of this exercise, which is polarization. And then I'm going to show you the round 2 and the round 3 questions that you're supposed to talk about in your groups. So as I said, either have pencil and paper ready or your phone ready to take a picture of those questions. So the topic is polarization. Polarization is a natural part of any election as a way of differentiating between political parties and candidates. But today, we are increasingly seeing Americans who vote for other parties, not just as different or we're increasingly seeing Americans who vote for other parties, not just as different or wrong, but as morally corrupt or even evil. Contributing to this, based on our politics, we read different news sources that support our existing narratives. This kind of polarization can halt progress on important policies, even one with a majority of the country's support, sparking anger and resentment in politics, fraying our social fabric, and leading more people to fear the potential for violence. So, for round 2, for which is going to be your round 1, when you get into your breakout groups, take 2 minutes each to answer one of the following questions without interruption. And then after everyone has answered, take a minute or 2 for any clarification and responses, and then move on to round 3. So you can answer one of these questions. Are you aware of a positive outcome of a new understanding, from a new understanding of a different perspective? What happened? What do you wish someone else would do to address polarization? And what would you do to address polarization? Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to get those questions. Can I move on? Okay. round 3, or for you, round 2, reflecting on the conversation. Take 2 minutes each to answer one question. What was the most meaningful or valuable thing to you in this conversation? What learning, new understanding, or common ground was found on the topic? Is there a next step you would like to take based on this conversation? And then if there's extra time, just continue to discussion until you're back to us. And when we come back, we're gonna reflect on the experience as a whole. Okay, so we just have a few minutes. So does anyone want to kind of share a reflection about what they think of these living room conversations? Does it seem like a useful approach for you? What do you think?
Well, I'm wondering if you could take down the share the screen so we can see each other.
Okay. There we go.
Except
So Judy, were you
saying something?
I was just going to say, Julie and I realize that this isn't easy, and there's no easy answers. But if just the idea of thinking about some of these things and how to share a point of view that doesn't threaten the other person. And we had a couple of examples in our, of how why people might feel the way they feel based on experiences, and recognizing that we're not all the same, no matter what side of an issue we're on. We all have different perspectives. So that, I think it was very valuable, but we could probably spend, like 2 hours talking about it and still not solve it.
Right. Yeah. Focus on the technique, not on the topic, because we're not going to solve it.
Right.
Anyone else have any reactions to the approach here? Jill, you need to unmute.
We were at the very end talking about, or at least I raised the question of, how do we get both sides in the same room? To me, it's hard to have a conversation if you can't get both sides there to begin with. So that's what, it's just the constant trying to get people there. And I don't know whether it's too uncomfortable. I think that's what Lori was saying. It's just uncomfortable for both sides. But also, I think it's I don't know. I think sometimes I think people want to argue. So if you tell them it's not going to be a debate, then they're not interested either. Some people come in wanting a debate, and that's not productive either.
But do we always have to target the extremes? Because, there's a lot of people in the middle. And, why can't we target the people in the middle?
Well, aren't we just aren't we just putting it out there? Cast the net widely is what LRC says.
Yeah.
So it's just, but
sense.
A lot of people will say, oh, well, maybe they say, oh, well, Jill's doing it, so surely it's some lib thing. So, I've been told that in my own church.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? So, okay, I'm gonna go back to sharing screen here. Okay, so Jill, do you want to share a little bit more about the living room conversations, what they're doing with elections?
Yeah, I'll just do it fast. So they have a number of topics on elections. So I encourage you, just go to livingroomconversations.org, and there is a whole area now on elections. One is called Trust in Elections, And they actually had a little 30-minute training recently, training, quote unquote. But anyway, if you wanted to join this, it's kind of an initiative for them. And so if you go online and see and look at that, they may still be inviting people. They're doing some incentives where if you do sign up to host one of these in your congregation or whatever, they have some incentives, gift cards, that kind of thing, and a little stipend for hosts. Whether or not they're going to continue that, I don't know. And it is going to end the end of August, which May and I agreed was probably way too early. But I would wholeheartedly suggest that you go look at those. We are going to do a series of 5, as I mentioned earlier tonight, and see how many people we can get out. I also wanted to say that when you do choose topics with living room conversations, the format is so easy, and you can also adjust it yourselves, customize it. So I'll give you a quick example. We did one a year or 2 ago called "What is Freedom?" And that's a great one to do. And we ended up, I wanted to find something to kind of feed into that. And I found online through museums, some of you, if you've been to Washington, D.C., there used to be a great museum about the news. It's gone now, but their website's still there. And they have still, I just looked it up the other day, a fabulous quiz called "What Does Freedom Mean to Me?" And when we did this, it was kind of coming out of COVID. So it was a really good discussion around COVID and other freedom issues like guns and et cetera. But anyway, it's a great quiz. And we sent it out to the people who had signed up to come to the virtual discussion. And they came in and we discussed that as well as the other discussion questions. And it was fascinating. And we did have people at both ends of the spectrum. And their ideas of freedom were so different, but it gave us a really rich conversation. So those are other things you can do with this. I can't say enough about this toolkit.
Thanks,
Maybe-
Jill. Thank you. So, as you can recall, I had started with this article, and the crux of the article was that people want more information. And so that's really, in my opinion, what we're trying to do with this voter participation initiative within the diocese. But for me, the key element is that we need divine assistance with this election. And I want to share an initiative that I found out about. It's actually going to focus mainly on the week before and after the election, and it's sponsored by Sojourners, and it's basically a call for prayer. Congregations across the country and spanning denominations and faith traditions will be uniting in a commitment to fervent prayer on the weekends before and after November 5 election. And it's inspired by the way the faith community came together in concerted prayers in the lead up to the historic 1994 election in South Africa. And it has materials on this website that's listed at the bottom, including a litany for the 2024 election, which was adopted from a litany by an Episcopal missioner. So I want to close with kind of an excerpt from that, but I just think with all this, the topic of today in terms of dealing with misinformation and disinformation and trying to have civil conversations, prayer is probably the really important part of the answer that needs to happen. So let's close in prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Gracious God, our holy and living Spirit, we pray that you might move upon every human heart of this nation to remove barriers that divide us, that walls of separation and suspicions may disappear, and all hatred and prejudice which blocks us from the light of your love will cease. O God, we confess that this election season in our history has not brought out the best in so many of us. Forgive us when we are less than truthful with one another, and forgive us when we are less than loving towards our neighbors. Guide us through Jesus Christ, our loving Lord and reigning Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.